Good evening, everybody. This is opening the Harbor Committee's working group on governance. We have 4 members, 3 of which are present. David Farag, Debbie Shad,
Here and present, yeah.
Debbie, you can say present.
Oh, sorry, present.
Lisa Hewitt. Not attending this evening is Barbara Canny. We also have with us this evening Montana Cassell, who is a member of the planning department, and George Baumgarten, who is a Harbor Committee member at large, I believe. This is designation.
Thank you. George Baumgarten, present.
So we do not have any minutes to approve this evening. So we will go to the other agenda item, which is the main agenda item, would be input from present Harbor Committee members concerning the present structure of the Harbor Committee. I believe, I know I sent out to the Harbor Governance Subcommittee members a copy of the present bylaw. Let me pull it up here. It's pretty simple. A second, please. I think it's like 2 sentences. Yeah, just for context, I will just read what the present structure of the Cohasset bylaw is. And this is something, David, I'd like to ask you. It used to be like Article 9, and now it's written as Article 30-62. I don't know if the bylaws have just been recodified.
They have, but I don't know if it's caught up yet, because it's still going to the Attorney General to be passed, and then it takes a while to get on that E360. So it just might be the section and verse that they're doing as a part of the, the giant code for Cohasset.
Right. Well, it is presently online, referred to as Cohasset Bylaw, Section 30-62, Cohasset Harbor Committee. It says amended 4/6/1991. I believe there was a possibility that it was in existence prior to that, and that was just one of the prior amendments. But that's the one it's alluded to in the caps of the bylaw. The bylaw reads, Section A, the Cohasset Harbor Committee shall consist of 11 members appointed by the selectmen as follows: 2 citizens at large for 3-year terms, 1 representative of the Yacht Club, 1 representative of the Cohasset Center for Student Coastal Research, 1 representative of the Cohasset Maritime Institute, 1 representative of the Sailing Club, 2 representatives of the Commercial Fishermen, 1 independent member, 1 representative of the Recreation Commission, and the Harbor Master shall serve as a permanent ex officio member. Each appointment thereafter shall be for a 3-year term. Nothing contained herein shall affect or change the terms of those individuals now in office. And then it alludes to the amended version, which was 4/20/2018, by Article 24, which was adopted on the floor of the town meeting. And I think I can give notice, because I was one of the original petitioners, that added the Cohasset Maritime Institute and the Center for Student Coastal Research. That was that amendment. And they're here, and then the Section B of this bylaw speaks to the scope, and it refers to subsection B. The Harbor Committee shall make recommendations to the selectmen and the town meeting concerning operation of the harbor in all its enormity. So that's the bylaw. So I think one of the first things we want to do is hear from present members of the Harbor Committee, and I'll ask George if you'd like to make some comments.
Sure. I've looked at this, and this has come up because the chair of Harbor Committee also has proposed an alternate structure back in April. That being said, I think the current bylaw, I'm in favor of maintaining the current bylaw as is. I think it is representative of groups that I think sufficiently can represent the needs of the harbor. And are very complementary to the municipal harbor plan that was accepted and adopted by the state back in 2020, and are in a good position to move projects that are in that plan forward. I like the charge on this is very broad, or it's simply that we make recommendations relative to the operation of the harbor. And I think that is appropriate, and I would not want it to be narrower than that. I think there's a little bit of ambiguity. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between a citizen at large and an independent member, but I also don't think it's worth changing just because I'm not sure what that means. And maybe so that's how I think. I think it should be maintained. I do have a question that I'd like to clarify. When it refers to ex officio member and the harbor master, when I look at Google, what ex officio is defined as on Google, it says that is a voting member of the committee. That is that's what Google says. I looked in Cohasset bylaws and didn't find any definition of ex officio, but I did look at a number of other committees like the Design Review Board and others that also have ex officio members, and it would appear that those members are also voting members of the committee. I guess I'd ask the governance group, does anybody have any point of view on my question about what is ex officio? What's the role?
David or Debbie, do you want to comment on what you believe the definition is?
I mean, I guess I always assumed, I'm on a couple of other committees where we have an ex officio member, and I always assumed they were non-voting. And that they were on the committee. I thought ex officio meant kind of because of their position with the organization, they were on the committee, but kind of more as a resource listening in type member. I wonder if Robert's Rules of Orders clarifies this at all. I
mean, Google comes out with a dozen definitions. All of them say it's a member of the committee voting, and they're on there because of their position.
Yeah, I have seen in other resources when people are listed as ex officio, sometimes there was also the clause and will be a non-voting member, but that is absent from this language.
And it's also not there's nowhere listed, at least that I saw in the bylaws with the other. So Design Review Board, Bylaw Committee, and the Computer Advisory Board all have ex officio membership. And the Design Review Board is sort of the clearest, or maybe the Computer Advisory is clearest that it implies they are voting, but I didn't see anywhere that it says that. I don't, it's not a significant deal if we keep this current definition for Cohasset Harbor Committee. It just means that by my understanding, Lori Gibbons would be a voting member of the committee, and she would be part of the quorum. Ex officio is also part of the quorum. They're not a separate membership class in that respect.
I think it's not. I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
I was going to say, in my mind, whether it stays the same or whether it gets modified in any way, I would always be in favor of including the harbor master and having them as a voting member, unless there was some state law or some obscure thing that we don't know about the town council would alert us to. But I think it's crucial to have the harbor master in there as one of the members. I especially for this type of committee, I couldn't see it any other way, really. So whether, again, if there's any modifications or whatever, I would always include the harbor master and make them a full member, minus, like I said, minus any other difference from town council would give us on the matter.
exactly. I mean,
So
especially.
the other comment I would make about a change or not is, I think that the Harbor Committee does have a near-term opportunity to be effective in a lot of things that are going on. You know, there's a lot of change happening on the harbor with Border Street and Margin Street and the developments that are happening there. And it would be great to have a Harbor Committee be in a position to represent the operation of the harbor, like in now, you know, now. And I would fear that a bylaw change would slow things down or put us in a holding pattern that wouldn't be productive. The other part that I see is, you know, we know that, and Montana can attest to this, the Woods Hole Group, I think, is poised to present their final results of the study. And those are something that the Harbor Committee would benefit from being in place, being able to take action with the groups that are currently assembled. So I don't see a benefit of making a change to it.
Yeah, to the point of having a change take a long time, is that based on that point, I know, you know, government moves extremely slowly. It took us years to get the Harbor Committee plan done. And frankly, one of the main reasons we got it done, because I was there at the very beginning, was because we hired a professional to draft it and put it together. And you know, it was an engineering firm and a consultant firm that knows these things. And it took us a very long time to get the Harbor Committee members appointed. And it also took us a very long time to get the CHIP and also the governance subcommittee appointed. You know, I'm not settled in my mind about, you know, change or no change, but I think, George, you make a huge, very valid point on that matter.
What about I was going to ask George, what about the size and makeup of the committee? Because it's currently 11 members. When it was done, it included, for instance, like the Recreation Commission, which might be germane or not germane to the committee, and, you know, just the size and scope of the committee itself. What have you seen sort of in your time on it, and would you, you know, in your estimation, make any modifications to that?
I would say that, you know, I've been to the most recent meeting in January. We had every member attend. So it is possible to have all members attend, plus the public. It's been a challenge to get a quorum at a number of other meetings, but I would argue that, you know, advanced planning and polling of the members in a different way than perhaps what we're doing today could result in, you know, an expectation of a quorum at many of the meetings. If I were doing this all over again and there was not a bylaw to run this at all, and this thing was, you know, hopelessly flawed, yeah, it'd probably be nicer to have a slightly smaller group, you know, 6 to 7 to 8. But, you know, the representation that's currently shown in this group is, you know, it's a good representation. So again, absent any glaring flaw in the bylaw, I'm again an advocate of working with what we have and trying to make what we have work. Again, rather than go through all the tribulations, which we also don't know will be more effective. That's the other thing I say. If there's a challenge of effectiveness with the current group, I don't know that a new, different constitution of the Harbor Committee will be more effective.
You know, I'm a little disappointed that Lori isn't here this evening, the harbor master isn't here this evening, and I would never speak for her. But in my conversations in the past with her about the structure of the Harbor Committee, she did mention that she thought it was a benefit to have the various organizations involved. Not so much, I know there's been a lot of conversation about vested interest or, you know, this and that, but it was more because they were people who were part of these organizations are very seaworthy and very cognizant of many of the issues, and that she could depend on them to give information. And once again, I don't want to suggest that I could ever speak for her. So this is something that
No.
maybe Debbie and David, we could reach out and to her and ask her for her opinion. But that was the sentiment that I got, that she
Yeah.
felt that they were, I suppose it's the human dynamic that if you gravitate towards something, you're usually knowledgeable about that matter.
Yeah.
But the present bylaw does speak to members at large too, so that's why
Absolutely.
I think that's important. Montana, I'm just calling you. Do you have any questions that you might be interested in asking?
I don't have any questions at the moment. I will say Lori did come to my office the end of last week and did express those same exact like ideas about the structure of the Harbor Committee. I think a lot of you may understand why after the last meeting. She just thinks that it needs to be restructured a little better. She didn't go in depth about it, but she did stop by my office with slight concern about the structure of it.
And did you express any opinions about what part of the structure, or?
She expressed concern over the chair
Okay.
of the Harbor Committee.
Well, as kind of the worker here, chair of this group, I truly want to keep this not. I talk about personalities. I want to stay on structures, but I do think that there are certain things that George mentioned as far as attendance and quorums and notification. I think that one of the obstacles have been that there wasn't a standing meeting. Like everybody didn't know, like everything else that I'm involved with in my life. I know my board meeting for my office is at a certain date, and so you can plan, especially with people who are busy and have busy lives with family and business and et cetera, et cetera. The timing. And Montana, I'm sorry, you've been the recipient of a lot of whining on my part on this point. Having meetings before the end of the professional workday, I think has been an issue that has to be addressed, going forward, no matter what the configuration.
I think whatever configuration it takes is that it should have a standing meeting, whether it's once a month or what have you, and whether it's the first Tuesday of every month or whatever it ends up being. And I just think from scheduling purposes, not just for the board, but also from the because there's still a lot of Zoom going on and so for them to be able to hook the meetings up and get them in Zoom land, when you try and say, oh, well, next week we want to have a meeting, on next Wednesday, you're bumping into who knows whatever. You got the planning board, you got all these things. So I think to have just a standing meeting, whatever it is, once a month on the same day, then the select board does that. They put out their schedule, way in advance, and it's easier for not only the members but for the public if they so chose. But one of the things I did want to ask George was one of the things we were able to do on the governance committee here or the subcommittee was look at a bunch of different of the bylaws from different towns. So, we had Situate, Marshfield, things like that. And one of the things that they had in there was the, sort of the robustness of what the definition of what the committee or the should do. So like, for instance, in Marshfield, which was the one I thought was one of the better ones, and they had a waterways committee, but it says the waterways committee recommends procedures, policies, and regulations to the Board of Selectmen of the town of Marshfield on matters affecting the safety, navigation, recreational activities, fishing interests, natural resources, and the planning and management of Marshfield's waterways. So it was pretty robust and not just stuck to things, say, on the harbor. And it just said, it was just a better view of what it had. So therefore, no one could ever be accused of you going outside of the boundaries of what the committee should be doing. And so I like something like that definitionally would really, I think, help. It would also help steer the committee into what they should be looking at, because everybody could say, well, you could look at this, you could look at that, we want to do this, you could be all over the place, but it would really, the charge, I think, of that would really be helpful to define more. And I was wondering if you thought if you had seen anything like that or were looking for any additions for that.
I'll say I looked. It's great to hear. Thank you for looking at the other towns.
I apologize, George. I should have sent those out to the Harbor Committee. The materials that I sent to the governance committee. I can send them forward to you.
Well, I looked at the I was on this quest to try and find a definition for ex officio within the Cohasset bylaws. But in so doing, I went through and looked at the bylaws affecting many of the town committees. And it's there's a wide level of disparity, not in a bad way, around the definition of many of the Cohasset committees, some of which define a charge within the bylaw, others do not. I think, to your point, David, I think having a broad and more a clearly defined mission that takes part B of the current bylaws as we make recommendations concerning the operation, to broaden that so that it is more encompassing, to draw in the members of the committee, make them more effective. I think that would be great to do. Again, I would pause before wanting to, amend the bylaw to do it. I think it could be done potentially out, as a working charter within the committee rather than have to change the bylaw. But I like the idea.
That was what when David, when you just mentioned that, I was wondering if, like the charge that was created by the selectmen for for this committee and for the CHIPS committee, we could ask the selectmen to charge the overall harbor committee, or as George just suggested, it could be the beginning of every year, we could create a charge elected amongst the members.
Review a mission, yeah.
Right. I was just looking up ex officio, and I was going to mention this earlier, but I wanted to have some sort of corroboration of it. And this says, as a result of one's status or position. So Lori is a harbor master, so then Lori is the member, I'm the general counsel of my office, so that makes me an ex officio member of a bunch of different things. It's your office. It's not Lisa Hewitt getting appointed, it's the harbor master getting appointed, so it's ex officio.
Yes,
Denoting or relating to a member of body who holds the role as a result of their status or another position that they hold. So.
Good. I do have another comment, and it's come up in the harbor committee, and I was trying also to figure this out. In the harbor committee, it says that we shall have 2 representatives of commercial fishermen. And it has come up several times that the most thoughtful and outspoken, in a good way, fishermen that do business in Cohasset Harbor don't live in Cohasset. They live in Scituate or other places, and by definition can't serve. You can't serve on a town committee because you have to be a voting member of Cohasset. So I looked through all the rest of the, how the committees are defined in the bylaws. And that doesn't look like an easy thing to change or to make an exception to. Now, that being said, the harbor committee wants to have representation of fishermen, the commercial fishing fleet, aquaculture, et cetera. And I think, harbor committee is not a committee that does a lot of voting. We do a lot of listening, a lot of hearing, a lot of talking and communicating, but not a lot of voting. And I think and there's a lot of opportunities in the committee to have citizens at large. And, you're not excluded if you're not from Cohasset. You just have to say where you live in order to opine on topics that are brought before harbor committee. So that being said, I think it's been a challenge to get a commercial fisherman or two to actually who live in Cohasset to be on the harbor committee. But that the harbor committee could find ways to work through that to get their opinions and knowledge heard for purposes of proposing policy and making recommendations to the select board without those people being members of the committee, because it just doesn't look like that's an easy thing to solve.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also want to make special note the fact that 2 members of the Cohasset fleet come to most of our meetings. But they're Scituate members, and they have both asked me to always give them notice whenever we're having a harbor committee meeting, and they are very thoughtful. Some of our earlier meetings, pre-harbor plan, it was kind of rocking and rolling. There was some very interesting meetings where people were totally respectful. It wasn't necessarily the fishermen, but it was just kind of
Yeah,
combative. But in the last 2 years, especially around some of the huge projects that will have direct impact on their income, and how they practice their craft, I think they've been very helpful and very informative too. I mean,
Yeah.
very, very informative. So I agree with you.
so to that end, again, look at the bylaw. I'm proposing not to change the bylaw, but that as a function of leadership, the Harbor Committee can find a way to be effective and have those opinions heard, even if we don't have, all the positions on the Harbor Committee filled by the various representatives.
So I'm not sure if anybody has any other questions.
Well, I don't know if this is easily answered, but so somebody seems to think that it would be a good idea to change the bylaw and the composition of the Harbor Committee. Is there a split on the Harbor Committee about this, or where does the proposal to, downsize to 5 members come from?
We have never discussed as a committee the structure of the Harbor Committee. And that's what I'm hoping to come out of this governance subcommittee, if we have a recommendation or even an exploration with documents and a recommendation to bring to the Harbor Committee for that very discussion. My understanding is the most recent draft that I forwarded to you a while ago was proposed by Tim, and it was accompanied. Forgive me if I'm conflating two things, but there was an email that Tim shared with the Harbor Committee saying that he was going to recommend to the selectmen that the present Harbor Committee be dissolved, which speaks to the idea that I don't know if he understands that it's a bylaw and it can't be dissolved by the selectmen. Of course, they can give a recommendation to dissolve it, but then he proposed that it be more of a smaller working group. George, is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the email was sent out and, I did comment to it, then look forward to discussing it, because to do anything more than that in an email would be a deliberation. So I didn't feel like it's a good spot to do it. And that is somewhat coloring my question about ex officio, because Tim's proposal to have 5 at-large members plus a whole bunch of ex officio members does not make it
He's smaller.
it does not make it more nimble. And also locking in the various working groups, into a bylaw, I don't think is necessary or appropriate. As things change, we may have different working groups that we recommend to the select board. And I think the way the working groups are now, which is outside the bylaw, is just fine.
Yeah. And I would even argue that possibly, the need to appoint people to a working group by the selectmen seems a little bit overkill too. It's too bad that it just can't be members, which would help engagement, even, to various groups, or let the, at the direction of the chair or other members, allow other people to be part of working groups, just because they bring knowledge and, and interest.
Yeah. I think that's unwieldy to have working groups propose to perpetuate this model, like particularly with David, Debbie, and others who are not part of Harbor Committee, but in order to be on the working group, have to be approved by the select board. I think it's unwieldy.
Yeah. I was thrilled that they both when I encouraged them to apply because of their
it worked.
Because it makes a lot of sense, I think, sometimes to have more people, more expertise, more, more eyes on things.
Yeah.
So once again, I'm sorry that there are not more individuals here from the committee. I'll take some blame for that.
I had another question too,
Sure.
was for George. Yeah, looking into the future and obviously from the yacht club, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the harbor or the waterways going forward, whether it's with infrastructure or otherwise? What do you see as the big sort of things, let's say the next 10 years that might be coming up for the committee? I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's
No, it's
yeah.
all right. I do think the municipal harbor plan in 2020 did a good job of creating a very wide-ranging inventory of all the possible things that could come up in the next 10 years or more. What I've seen happen in a few areas, particularly in the area of resilience, is we have continued to build upon, refine, and get more data and more precision around extreme weather related events. That's an example of something that took the municipal harbor plan and went further. I think that if you look at where development's happening in Cohasset, the harbor is a primary draw. In addition to the suburbs and other undeveloped land, but I think the whole Cohasset harbor is poised to be redeveloped on the Border Street side and the Butler Estate, on the Margin Street side. There's a lot of potential change happening. So I think managing the reconstruction of the harbor that will be primarily pursued by private interests, and doing that in a thoughtful way that addresses climate resilience, recreational needs. I think that's going to be a lot of the next 10 years. And I say that the other thing that's happening is the commercial fishing fleet. We've always wanted to maintain that. I don't know that the Harbor Committee's been overly effective at influencing that, but they are so buffeted by federal regulations and the upcoming aquaculture and the fact that fishermen can't afford to live in Cohasset. That's another challenge that I think Harbor Committee is in a position to at least attempt to understand, is how to maintain the health and vigor of the commercial fishing fleet.
And as a group, when the Harbor Committee report was voted on, that was let's say number 1 or number 1A, maintaining the commercial fishing fleet was very, very important to the group who was active, listening to the experts and talking about what we wanted to do. So, but since that time, yes, we have a new ramp. Yes, we have a new, but then we don't really have the hauling system in play yet. And as George mentioned, there's so many regulations that have to be ironed through. So,
I mean, there's that, what we heard from the fishermen is, even assuming we get in a really good commercial pier that enables, machines to do the work that currently human labor is doing, there's still a challenge of these people making a living from the sea with federal regulations that put a stop to it for months at a time. And what we've heard is an interest, in what other opportunities are there to make money from the sea coming out of Cohasset Harbor. And again, I'm not proposing, getting in bed with Situate on their oyster farm off Bassings Beach. That's not what I'm saying. But what we did hear from the fishermen who have attended is they want the Harbor Committee to have an open mind and to work with them to explore how they can continue to make a living as a commercial fishing operation.
absolutely.
So David, does that answer or head toward answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I saw it in looking around at things also was that the climate resiliency, that's where there's going to be state and federal funding, whether it's dredging the harbor, whether it's redoing the whatever you would call it there, the sea walls, the barrier walls, all of that has to be done on a rotating basis of so many years anyway, and so that's going to pop up no matter what. And then everything on the road side, there's other resiliency opportunities there as well, and that's where I see infrastructure wise is where the action is. That's where that's where the state dollars are going to be put towards. Cohasset's always done well environmentally getting grants for things because it used to be scored to the amount of the need of that resiliency. That the scoring has kind of changed a little bit with equity things and things thrown in, but nevertheless we stand a much better chance of getting grants for that than we do, say, for education or something like that. We're not in the ballpark on those grants. But when it comes to these environmental grants, we can hit the top of the list. And it's also as the town creates relationships or extends relationships that they have with some of the other nonprofit groups, or whether it's CZM, the state and federal level, when you're able to do something and then execute it, when you go for the next grant, it changes, it unlocks the key, or the key unlocks the door on it. And when they know that you're able to do it, you're going to be able to get bigger grants and do other things and step up on it. But those relationships are so important, and you only get them, is when you're actually doing something. So you might not start off with the biggest thing that you're going to have, but you're going to start off with something small and then be able to show that you're able to execute on that level and then go from there. So I think that's where you're going to see it. And there's also your typical accoutrements that you're going to need in the harbor infrastructure wise as well. Your docks, your piers, looking at the moorings, can those be expanded for more usage, and that goes to the recreational. So I think all of those things are things that you'll see over the next 10 years, but that's where, maybe redefining the charge, whether it's in a bylaw or whether it's in the charge, helps to, point the committee towards that. Focus them towards that effort. You can have things also with the Gulf River. As always, the Gulf River is important because it dumps right into the inner harbor before it goes to the outer harbor. There's going to be issues there. So I think all of those things. The one thing I would say is that it's called the Harbor Committee, and one of the things with the Waterways Committee is to making sure that it's got the language in it so that it covers beyond just the harbor, so that you're dealing with the, and again, it's all advisory capacity, but the harbor master has jurisdiction, over moorings that are out in the sea, plus going into other waterways in town. And I would think to just make sure that that's included as well in any charge to be looked at.
There was, in our last meeting, we did discuss that a little bit, David, if you remember, with the harbor master, and she referred to the river, and also with Little Harbor being in some other part of the bylaw as encompassing in the definition.
It is, but it's almost like hidden. So
right,
and so it's not a matter that, but it's just a matter of getting a little bit more front and center, because when you say the Harbor Committee, the focus just seems to be that's it.
Exactly.
And it's not
over, right.
Yeah. And so it doesn't even seem to include the Gulf River. It doesn't seem to include, off of Sandy Cove or places like that. So I would just get it a little bit more front and center in the definition to make sure it's known.
Yeah. And you wonder if that could be accomplished by amending some other part of the bylaws and the definitions, as opposed to amending the Harbor Committee mandate or complement of members. There's my office is enabled, authorized through a chapter, and we're always afraid to touch it, because if it ever is touched, what will happen? And that sometimes happens when you do legislative amendments, that if there's another piece that could be worked on or enumerated, as George has mentioned, in a charge.
But I'm gonna tell you why, and it's not to just say, oh, well, Harbor Committee should be just looking at these things and looking to be, punitive in some way or something like that. It's not that at all. But you could see a package where you've got some resiliency, and you could be looking for upgrades for, say, stormwater management, and it could include the harbor, but you might want to include Little Harbor as well, or other places. And so as a part of that package, you're gonna, it could be a wider grant opportunity for something like that, and you're going to want those included, and to have the Harbor Committee, at least on the advisory capacity of it, would be very helpful. And so that's the way I would see it. And because the harbor master already has the jurisdiction over the moorings and things like that, but I could definitely see it.
David, I would agree. It would be ideal. Again, I pause about rewriting the bylaw. As an example, the Woods Hole Group, has already previewed their results, and they're telling us that one of the biggest points of vulnerability is water going right up the Gulf River and coming down Black Horse Lane.
Right.
The good news is, I think all the local citizens and our harbor committee will be involved in reviewing those results. And then any work we do, whether it's Brian Joyce or Montana and others, to get grants and to solicit funding for that, that's where the broadness, the harbor committee, whether we have the mandate or not, will be participating in a broader group to try and make those things happen.
I just got a text from Lori apologizing for not being on this, but she said she can get on shortly if we want to jump on, because I think I'd be interested in any comments she can make if you don't mind holding on a little bit. She says she's busy with the sunken boat. So,
Oh, well, there
that's a good excuse. Okay.
that's a good excuse. A law of salvage.
There's a boat that sank on Black Rock Beach. And, if it had gone 50 yards further, it would be Hull's problem. But it sank on the Cohasset side of Black Rock Beach.
Oh, my. That's
and I presume that's what she's talking to, that they've been working on it. It's not a big boat. It's like a 20-foot speedboat that went off its mooring. And,
it was really windy earlier.
Yesterday. Yesterday it did.
Yeah.
Because I remember the town has come a long way on this, but I just look at all of this as how you're gonna shoot forward, and especially looking at the horizon 10 years from now or whatever. So you're gonna have your dredging, your seawalls, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we had the original, some of the original stormwater stuff, when they did the Little Harbor sewer project, I remember when it came to us on Conservation Commission, and it was the water department, sewer department, they were looking into doing everything there. And they came in front of us, and we said, well, what are you going to do about the stormwater, that you're opening roads and closing roads, and, that have been there since the 50s, and there's been expansion of housing since then, things like that. And they said, well, what's stormwater? So they ended up, it wasn't in the package, and then they added it, and they said, well, if you pass it now, we'll put this extra package at town meeting. And thank goodness it passed. It was an extra $1.5 million, and they did, storm scepters, all these other things in the Little Harbor project, which greatly helped certain sections of town. But that was back in around 2008, around the time I think it was. And so now, there's still some areas of town that have flooding, like as you were saying, Black Horse Lane, which is right off of the harbor. There's other areas that we know of as well, and that's where, when you're looking to get it done and you're looking for other things, that's where the grants and things are going to come into play. And that's hopefully where, the harbor committee can help out on that, and looking into those other waterways too, not just the inner harbor. But
did you by any chance see not only the work that George headed up as far as resilience stuff? I believe it's on the harbor committee website, but then Montana brought some experts in to, present a resiliency assessment, and it was pretty breathtaking. Is it present? I believe it's presently you posted it on the website, didn't you?
Yeah, it should all be on the website. And also, just so everyone is aware, we are going to have our last public meeting on June 12th with the finalized resiliency suggestions that we will be applying for the next CZM coastal resiliency round.
That's Woods Hole Group is doing their final?
Yeah, I will be virtual, but Cassandra and Nasser, who's the lead scientist, will be in person at the library. I'm going to start advertisement tomorrow, so everyone will be aware. But since you guys are here already and we're discussing, I'll tell you now.
No, that's great, and we can help you publicize that too. Get
yes,
people if that.
I think you got Lori here coming or somebody.
Oh, good. Yeah. Hi, Lori.
Montana, where is this on? Which website? Which part of the website is?
Yeah, it should be. So under the planning department, when you go on the left side, all the tabs, all the way to the bottom, you'll see CZM coastal resiliency. I can also send you guys the link to make it easier for you as well.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Montana. Lori, is that you? I think it is.
Yeah, that's me. I'm here.
Thank you for saving the sunken boat.
I didn't say that.
Oh dear. So I appreciate you jumping on, because you're probably, extremely busy. But I appreciate you taking the time. And as you know, the agenda item this evening is to talk about any recommendation we have to send to the selectmen, or quite frankly, initially to the Harbor Committee about restructuring the Harbor Committee. George, I don't know, George, if you want to recap, because I don't want to speak for you, your opinion at this point.
Yeah, hi, Laurie, George Baumgarten. Just in terms of talking about the bylaw, I think my view is the current committee structure and the representation of it is actually quite helpful to the Harbor Committee by and large, and that I would advocate keeping the current bylaw in place and keep the current committee structure in place. Just as Tim said, we'll have new elections, and I think we can do some things from a leadership perspective to try and make the committee more effective. That would be my perspective.
Thank you, George. What I was hoping, Laurie, is that you could give us your opinion because you've served on it for many years, but I'm also particularly interested in, as a harbor master, what you need, what you need from a harbor committee, and if you think the present structure fulfills that need.
Yeah, I really like the present structure because we have a very integrated, very active community here between, the yacht club and the sailing club and CMI for all the recreation that they provide for townspeople. Also, CSCR with the research that they're doing, they're involving a lot of the kids. And then, there's the fisherman aspect, the commercial aspect that needs to be heard from. And then, when you have the people at large, they're basically, in my opinion, they're representing the community at large, but also they're representing, Paul Trendowitz and his marina, and the people at Old Salt House and Atlantica, whatever's going on over there, if they're going to have a dock or anything. So I think the present structure really does do a good job focusing on the different interest groups, which are many in this harbor. And it's a close-knit community, and I think everybody needs to be able to be represented by people who are active in the harbor.
Laurie, earlier I didn't want to speak for you, but I did recount what I believed was your sentiment, that you thought it was good to have individuals who were, seaworthy or salty or knew how the harbor worked and the pluses and minuses of the process. So I wanted you to know that I stated that in your absence.
Yes, and that's correct. I think it's important to have people that know about the harbor. To start with where the harbor is, and because I have people come in here, I've never been down this end of the town before. No, I think it's very important to have people that are active within the harbor and want to be able to, see good things happen.
So David or Deb, do you want to ask any questions of the harbor master?
Well, I guess I'd be curious how Laurie feels about whether we can somehow incorporate the Gulf River and Little Harbor and Inner Little Harbor into the work of the Harbor Committee, even though it just says operation of the harbor right now.
Well, the bylaws do cover, or the regulations, I'm not sure about the bylaws, Little Harbor and the Gulf River to a certain extent. And, maybe the Gulf River, where they're interested in conservation and stuff, that association could be represented through, the people at the Recreation Department, and people at large. Most of the Gulf River is in Scituate. There's a big part of it in Scituate. The line does go down the middle of the Gulf. People along South Main Street and Stanton Road and River Road are in Cohasset. And then just got a few houses along Border Street, about 15 houses on Border Street that are in Cohasset. And we have the Black Horse Lane area as well. But I think we can very easily include, you know, those two areas in the Harbor Committee. I mean, maybe not adding more people to the committee, but somebody could be their voice for them, you know, maybe somebody at large.
Mhm.
David?
Yeah, one of the things we had talked about, Lori, was, you know, the name of the Harbor Committee, it just seems to be so harbor focused, whereas, you know, if it was expanded like the other towns do to a waterways committee, it would include the harbor as well. And part of the reason is that even though you have jurisdiction over things, you know, like the moorings and the you know, all the waterways, you've got jurisdiction as the harbor master. But, you know, we're thinking as time goes on, if there's going to be grants or resiliency water features needed in different areas of town that are close to waterways, that you know, some of that research and things are going to be plugged into the Harbor Committee or the Waterways Committee, whatever we call it, and that would be important to have that and to have it, you know, just express better that's the waterways in town.
I mean,
Yeah, but maybe don't use the term waterways. You know, maybe figure out a different title or something.
Yeah. Because all the other towns had kind of like Situate, Marshfield, they just, you know, they included it all. That was the difference. And ours seemed to be a little bit limiting, not fully limiting, but just a little bit. And because one of the ones I talked about, and I won't repeat it again because nobody needs to hear the definition, but was Marshfield. Marshfield had a really good, you know, definition of what they should be doing regarding, you know, safety, navigation, rec activities, fishing. You know, they kind of included all the interests that you would have in a harbor, but also extending them to the waterways as well. And so it just, you know, like I said, looking at our budding towns, they seem to have those, you know, that particular definition of it.
We have a shellfish, you know, constable or warden or whatever you want to call him, with his own set of, you know, rules and regulations. So I don't know if we want to include that under the purview of the Harbor Committee. I don't know.
Have to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like any harbor committee would still be advisory to the selectmen, but I think you could easily see that when you're dealing with issues, whether it was infrastructure or whatever, that they're going to want the harbor committee to sort of do the work on it, even if you have a consultant come in and do, you know, most of it, because, you know, as you've seen, their time is limited. They don't have, you know, 2 hours to go talk about, you know, what kind of infrastructure you need in the harbor or different things like that. And, you know, all that work has to really be, all of that busy work needs to be done by the committees and then sort of presented to them in order to be done.
I suppose a question I have for you, Lori, is there anything because of the present definitions that you've been limited or not able to accomplish because of the present language, the title or the bylaw?
No, not really. I really haven't had, you know, issues or problems with it. There may be some tweaking that needs to be done down the road with regulations. But that's something that, you know, can be addressed later on.
I was going to say the harbor master probably doesn't have it because she has the expansive jurisdictions, the harbor master, but the committee might have it in dealing in its advisory capacity. So.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess in terms of what we were talking about, or what you were talking about, David, in terms of applying for state grants or working with CZM or something, I mean, those grants would be applied for by the town,
Right.
not by the harbor committee.
Right.
So,
They do, but you know, and obviously you do them with the consent of the town manager and selectmen, but
Mhm.
I mean, what you'll find is that you get sort of a myriad of groups. So you get, you know, CZM, NOAA, you know, National Oceanographic would be there. I remember the one we did on Border Street for the collapsed culvert that we made a wetland restoration. We had, you know, NOAA, CZM, we had the Conservation Law Foundation kick in some money. You know, we had the Waterways Fund. We had all sorts. You know, we probably had 6 or 8 different groups on that. So, and you know, and we even got CPC funds on top of it for a little piece of it. So, you end up. You're right. The application is certainly town of Cohasset, but it ends up being that committee sort of is the inertia behind it.
was it the Harbor Committee that spearheaded that project?
that was the Conservation Commission back then when
okay.
we were on it.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit before the Harbor Committee got reconstituted and was able to do the, you know, the current harbor plan that you see. So it was before that. But you'll see a committee kind of be the driver on it, and then yes, you've got the town manager, selectmen, everyone knows about it, but you're the one doing all the gut work on it, you know, and doing all the meetings and everything, and they'll sense. But we have more staff now too in the town, so I think a lot of things were sort of left to the boards and volunteers before. I could see where town staff would be, you know, your town planner, obviously Montana, other town staff would be, you know, probably leading the charge on it this time.
Right. Okay. Well, Lori, thank you. We really appreciate you jumping on. I don't know if you have any other comments you want to make as far as the structure or any questions you might have.
No. Sorry, I was dealing with the boat on Black Rock Beach. We didn't get hauled out till about 5:30 tonight, so. that's been an all
If we
day.
could ask one question, I hate to ask it, but it was the same thing we asked George, was Lori, over the next 10 years, what do you see as the big issues that are going to affect the harbor?
My retirement.
Bravo.
There you go.
Well played, Lori.
Well, you know, they do have at-large positions on the harbor committee as well, so you can still stay on even if you do retire.
Oh, no. When I go, I go. I started out on the harbor committee in 1985, I think it was.
So here's
So I've been involved with this for almost coming up to 53 years. Too long.
so Lori, that's a very interesting question. When, because the amendment on the actual bylaw refers to the 1990s, I think, but you're saying that it existed prior to that, the Harbor Committee?
Oh, yes, it was founded, the first chairman was Charlie Fink, and it was called the Harbor Study Committee. And I think it was formed in 1970, I want to say. And then it was doing a study of the harbor, what can be done. And after they did their study, they then became the Harbor Committee. And it's the makeup it is now, less CMI and CSCR. Because when I was on it in 85, I was a fisherman representative. And there were like 9 people or 8 people in the committee. It was a big committee then too.
So forgive me, Lori, I interrupted you. I think you were beginning to answer David's question when I asked you about that historical allusion.
Oh, I think one thing, and I hate to say it, probably dredging. But you know, the channel has to be dredged. That's an ongoing topic. With all the development going on around here, I don't know what's going to be left to work with in the harbor, you know, between the boatyard and Atlantica and where the hotel was. so we've been whittling away at some of the projects, the boat ramp, that finally got taken care of. But I would say probably dredging. We will need dredging again in the next 10 years.
Thank you. Welcome, Susan. Susan Bryant is popped on. Hi, Susan.
Hi, sorry, I was on the water.
So Susan also is a member of the Harbor Committee. And Susan, what we've been doing up to this time is talking to various members, George and Lori, and I've been making comments too about the present Harbor Committee and the structure of it. What our agenda item is tonight was to look at the charge that the selectmen gave us, and number 2 of that charge was to look at the present structure of the Harbor Committee and give any recommendations. We had some comments from George Baumgarten, who tells us that he believes the present structure, is workable and could even get better. Forgive me for summarizing your terms, George. You can also pop in, mention more things if you'd like. And then we've been asking questions of Lori and of George, and I've been answering some as a member too. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. This is helpful to the governance subcommittee. And I don't know if you want to tell us what you think of the present structure, and we're trying to keep it to the structure and not really the history of what's been going on the last couple of years, but more talk about the functioning of it and talk about the function rather than the personalities, because there's a lot of personalities, myself included.
I can just add that one of the requests that I had made early on, and I think we had approved at the Harbor Committee, which hasn't actually happened, is that the chair would inform us of updates that had come through the chair across that person's desk, and inform the rest of the Harbor Committee about when there was a new update about something of relevance to the harbor. And that actually hasn't happened. So a lot of things have happened that have been totally surprises to me. And I feel like I'm on the Harbor Committee. I should know about that, and I haven't. So I would like that that if there's updates that have come across anybody's radar in the Harbor Committee, that we should have it. That should be the beginning of the meeting where we update everybody on everything that we know. Otherwise, we're not very functional.
I think what we're trying to do is comment on the actual bylaw, Susan, which is pretty broad, about the membership and the structure of the overall mandate.
Okay, so then, I would just I think that I see Debbie Shad there, and I don't believe the Cohasset Conservation Trust is represented on the Harbor Committee. But as the foremost conservation group in town that has protected a lot of open space and really done a beautiful job, including Bassings Beach Island, which is a huge importance to everybody culturally, including the harbor, and even the physical aspects of protecting the harbor from sea level rise is all about Bassings Beach. So if I would think that it would make sense to have the Cohasset Conservation Trust represented there as well. I know, Debbie, you'd love to have more meetings.
Well, we do have a largish board as well, so maybe we could find someone that might be willing to serve in that capacity.
Are there any questions that David or Debbie would like to ask Susan as a Harbor Committee member? Sorry,
Okay.
Mic on, so I wasn't sure. Okay. Oh, Susan, your mic is off.
The is the whole bylaw that thing that's in the email?
Correct. Most of the bylaw is the enunciation of the members. And the subsection B is the mandate.
Well, one of the things that I was looking to do was to, whether it's by, when we talked about it twice already, so I won't repeat it, but was as far as the charge or the mandate for the committee was to enunciate that a little bit better, because it's just kind of broad and it just includes kind of the harbor. And we looked at a number of different towns, especially Situate, Marshfield, ones around us, as to what they did and how they enunciated it for their different waterways and harbor committees. So we just want to get that a little bit more robust, I think, than what it is now. And then, although I do think that is an interesting point, and I wonder why wasn't the Quest Conservation Trust put in there in the beginning when it was first done there a few years back, because they certainly have land, don't they, on the other side as one of the groups.
I know from adding CSCR and CMI to the group that the reason they weren't enumerated initially, my assumption is that we didn't exist. CSCR and CMI didn't exist when the original Harbor Committee was constituted as Lori said, in the 70s.
Oh yeah, I know that much, but I'm talking about the Cohasset Conservation Trust. Why wouldn't they have been?
I mean, this probably has nothing to do with it, but we own the big chunk of Bassing Beach that you see in Cohasset Harbor, but it is officially
in Situate. Yeah.
That's my guess too.
So maybe that was the thinking, that it's not officially part of Cohasset. It's
right.
Situate.
Even though
Debbie, good job rebranding that as Cohasset, though. Way to go.
I thought
sort of no man's land out there, really. I mean, we hear a lot, we don't hear much from anyone, but we certainly don't hear from the town of Situate very often. And the town of Cohasset responds to emergencies out there or things that happen. So it's an odd relationship, but it is officially Situate. So
right. I was wondering about, that probably what originally was the mindset, and who knows, it was probably the people who were active at the time on the harbor,
we're right there with the commercial fishermen. We don't live in Cohasset. So.
Right.
I wonder, so David, were you part of the group? And I think Lisa, you were, that was researching what other towns had done. And then Lori, perhaps through her affiliations with different harbor masters. And Montana, I don't know if you get to work with other towns, but I wonder if there's some models that you all have seen, or mandates, I guess, is really, I'm not so much interested but the mandate is really what is of interest, I think, because that drives what we do. Are there towns that have interesting and useful mandates in a committee that's like this, that you could share with us? I don't get out much. I just live here in Cohasset, so I'd love to hear what other what's great about other places' choices.
Yeah, to that end, I did do some research and was done prior a couple of years ago on the makeup of various towns, waterways commissions, etc. And I did share it with David and Debbie as members of the governance subcommittee. And I can send it out to everybody, but David pointed out that he was particularly liked the language of the Marshfield mandate. But when we were talking, just to give a kind of a threshold comments, though, that some of us felt that we were concerned about amending the statute, the bylaw, too much, because then sometimes it can take on a life of its own with other amendments. But then it was commented that perhaps we could change a charge that is given, kind of a self-imposed charge. Any harbor committee could decide on a particular charge. And David, I don't know if you want to. I know you've read it 3 times, but
I'll be very quick. It just in Marshfield Data Waterways Committee, it says the Waterways Committee shall recommend procedures, policies, and regulations to the Board of Selectmen of the town of Marshfield on matters affecting safety, navigation, recreational activities, fishing interests, natural resources, and the planning and management of Marshfield's waterways. So it really encapsulated everything there. The only thing I would say, though, with not amending a bylaw, the only issue that you might have, and you'd have to just check with the town council, is that if you have a bylaw which says that you've got to just focus on the harbor, and then you create a charge which expands that jurisdiction to say the Gulf River or other places, you might be going beyond the authority of what was there in the bylaw. So
Good point.
that might be something that could get challenged down the road. So you might want to look at that, and where if you make the bylaw more the bylaw is kind of the bones of everything, and then your regulations are the meat on the bones. So but if you're not authorized to do it to begin with, then to expand that jurisdiction, that might be something that it could be an issue. So you might want that in the bylaw in some way, shape, or form to have be more expansive.
And that's why I will take on the task of following up on what Laurie mentioned about the other bylaws and references that could possibly be incorporated by reference by other sections of the bylaws to see if it would stand. And then
That would be a way.
Yeah, we could run it by town council to see if we're solid on that. If in fact, now mind you, we're advisory to the full harbor committee, they may feel differently about, any recommendation, and we really haven't even talked about what our recommendation is going to be yet. So, Susan, do you have anybody else want to ask Susan some questions about her opinion? Okay.
Can we ask Lori about her opinion? Because
Sure.
I feel like she has a lot to say about the harbor and the things concerning the operation of the harbor. That's really like her total bailiwick. And so what do we do? What do we do, and what might we do that's helpful to concerning the operation of the harbor as hopefully supportive citizens in this role, and what is just like double doing what you already do and is unnecessary and just tedious and a time suck for everybody.
Yeah, Laurie has already spoken a little bit, but kind of the same way. But Laurie, what do you think?
I forget what I said.
Well, let's see, my notes say that, I'll just cue you a little bit. So my notes said that you do like the present structure.
Yes.
And that you think that knowledgeable individuals are important to have on the structure, just to refresh the witness, Your Honor.
Yeah, no, I do think it's important that the people who are on the committee be stakeholders, that they use the harbor and stuff. And that's one thing with some of these waterways commissions, which I kind of shy away from. They're not representing, I don't want to say the interests of the boaters, but they don't know about the interests of the boaters because they're not a boater. If you understand what I'm saying, which I think it's important that people be a boater in the harbor. If they're going to serve on this committee, and I do like the structure. I think it really covers all the different aspects and different interests in the harbor, where there are quite a few interests. It's such a small area. How's that?
Okay. And then are we all okay with the harbor actually not being specified in the bylaw? I think that's been an issue in some discussions on the harbor committee, whether the harbor means inside the breakwater, inside the glades, including the Gulf River, not including the Gulf River. I'm just sorry, I don't know what the right answer is. I just see it as vague at this point.
I prefer the word broad. I think it's helpful to have it be a broad, and actually, to David Farrick's point, it's helpful. Ideally, it would be more broad in terms of at least what our role is, which is to advise the select board on potential improvements to the operation of the harbor at large. So I think it's good to leave it broad.
I guess I have a kind of a, it feels like the sense of this group, from what I'm hearing, is that people like the current representation on the harbor committee, the way it's laid out. And this is my sense of this, that people feel like ideally it would be better to clarify the definition of harbor so that it definitely includes
Mhm.
the Gulf River and Little Harbor, Inner Little Harbor, at least, probably just those areas. I don't think we want to go up every little stream, but and ideally, it would be nice to expand in a way like Marshfield did, all the different issues that the board would address. And I feel like something, maybe the process for actually changing the bylaw is holding the group back from wanting to make any changes that would clarify those things. So I guess my question is, what would be involved in, if this little working group wanted to recommend that we do those things, we would recommend that to the harbor committee?
Yeah, the process is the harbor, this working group is a working group of the harbor committee. The harbor,
Right.
it would then be presented to the harbor committee. Then the harbor committee would then recommend it to selectmen.
And then someone at that level would have to draft a new bylaw, and that would have to go through town meeting?
Yes,
that-
yes. Amendment to the bylaws has to be adopted by town meeting members.
Okay. I mean, I know it's a process, but it does seem like whatever work is going on now that's being presented to the harbor committee and that the harbor committee is dealing with could seamlessly flip over to, a harbor committee that had a slightly different, jurisdictional description under a new bylaw. It's not like it would go away, all the work would fall apart, the new committee would have to start from ground zero. I don't know.
I think some of the concerns.
I just feel like, there's a couple of things where we may be jumping through hoops to say, well, yeah, it says that, but we'll pretend it says this, or we'll pretend the harbor, quote unquote, is much broader than just the harbor. And I don't know if we should be so reluctant to consider putting a better bylaw in place.
Yeah.
Keeping, the sense of this group seems to be that the description of the composition of the group is good and that people like that. It's
I
just
think
these
that
other
the-
things.
Yeah, I think to the, it's interesting, the broad nature of the present language is very flexible in case something else came along that we wanted the harbor committee to engage in. Besides the jurisdictional issues David pointed out of the river and the little harbor.
Right.
But as far as the broad mandate, it's almost as if, in one attorney's view, that it is broad enough to be resilient, to be able to be, encompass things that could be coming down the pike later. But there is something to be said, as David mentioned, about the language of the Marshfield waterways definition that kind of helps people focus.
Right.
But maybe that focus belongs in deliberations or, the work agendas in a harbor committee. We've had not a lot of focus on the committee with some of the projects, and so maybe that would be helpful.
Can I add something? I feel that when Lori said that it's helpful to have people that are knowledgeable and that are on the waters that we're talking about, I feel like I'm well qualified to be on the harbor committee as long as it's, Cohasset Harbor. But I row on Little Harbor a bit, but I don't really have any sense of the issues there. I know Holly Hill Farm is there, and otherwise it's all 100% residences. And that is, and the Gulf River is also 100% residential. So that's pretty different than negotiating, sharing resources with fishermen, boaters, paddleboarders, opti sailors, sailing club, commercial fishermen, yachties, visiting yachtsmen, launch services. Like the issues of the actual Cohasset Harbor are really complex and really do need to have a harbor committee that's representative of the people that are on those, that have those part of those interests. I don't really feel qualified to go talking about Little Harbor. And the Gulf River is another total, it's just very different. Like there's not, I mean, there could be commercial fishermen, there could be commercial fishing in the Gulf River, there could be commercial fishing in Little Harbor. But I think that the issues that most need to be negotiated are those that are shared, and those are within the regular Cohasset Harbor.
Yeah. Oh, I think we hear Lori's radio.
Oh, sorry. I turned it down.
No, not at all, not at all.
That's what ex officio means.
No in 24/7. Okay, I'm interested if there's any last comments the Harbor Committee members want to make on the question. And if not, then I think Debbie and David and I, should talk about next steps about coming up with what the process is going to be to make a recommendation.
Yeah, whatever recommendation we end up coming with, it has to go to the Harbor Committee anyway.
Correct.
So it can either be yayed, nayed, amended, or otherwise, as it goes up the ranks there. So.
Mhm.
Okay, so I would say officially, I would definitely like to keep the diversity of the membership as, at least as it is. I wouldn't want to go to fewer. And I would say that the commercial fishermen are supposed to be in it, and I think we're short a representative right now. I'm not positive about that, but
Yes,
I don't, that we shouldn't let that seat be that voice be unheard. That would be highly irresponsible, I think. And then beyond that, you guys are lawyers. I am not. 3 of you, I think, are lawyers. So I respect your opinions about what you think works and makes things like this functional. I don't really enjoy spending all my time, not all my time. I don't really enjoy spending time doing this sorts of thing. And I would rather be doing it if it's serving a really good purpose and being really useful and effective. So, and I, not being a non-lawyer, don't know how to make that happen, but I trust you who are and have experience working in different towns and seeing how different committees have worked to figure out the best thing. And I just have one other question, which I don't know about, and I wondered, is there or should there be a relationship spelled out between our work and zoning? Because that seems to be where that rubber hits the road. And I have no idea what the answer to that is. Just throwing it out there as people who have more experience perhaps could advise.
Well, I don't see it directly applicable. I mean, everything is that whole town is related to the rest of the town as far as any regulation, and
Right.
and any regulation or any change or any proposal is properly vetted. The thing that's different than zoning, we're purely advisory, and we're advisory to an advisory committee. So we're like, third removed, where zoning is an adjudicatory body. Like Concon, like others, they have a whole different mandate. It's been a long time since I sat on zoning, but it's there are a few applicable issues, but any change in the zoning of the harbor, et cetera, would be dealt with by the zoning board and planning board.
Well, I would say this: if there was a project on the harbor that was going in front of, say, the planning board or something like that, I think it would be wholly appropriate that the person as a citizen can just pipe in and say whether they like it up or down, or what they think needs to be done. And certainly with the member group that anybody's with. So if you're a member of the yacht club or the sailing club, or even with CSCR, you could come as that group in front of the planning board and give testimony, good, bad, or indifferent to that. I think as the harbor committee, though, because the jurisdiction of it is to deal with the things in the harbor and then advise the selectmen, I don't know how appropriate it would be like to take a vote of the harbor committee and say you're for a project or against it, because you're supposed to be advising the selectmen. not the zoning or the planning board, but certainly in those. So like with everything, everyone wears a bunch of different hats in the town, whether as a citizen, whatever nonprofit group you're in, and then whatever committee you're on. So I think as the group you're involved with, or as a citizen, you could go through that avenue, and that would be wholly appropriate, with any project that comes up, or even in zoning, if there was looking at the zoning bylaw for changes or something like that, that would be the case. But as a harbor committee, I don't know, because like I said, it's supposed to be advising the selectmen regarding rules, regs, and things like that. Yeah.
No, that's why I asked, like, should we, is that something that should be considered, is changing the bylaw to say harbor committee should make recommendations to the zoning board and the planning board and the selectmen, like before it goes, or I don't know. It's just, it's a thought, and because I'm interested in being effective and not just like have endless meetings, and not, and I also feel that the issues that have come up that we have actually addressed and have done something on, or helped make happen, have all been zoning issues. Chapter 91 overlays has been it's an accomplishment of the harbor committee, for better or worse. So that is, that's where we accomplish or don't accomplish things. So should we try to work more directly with planning and zoning? Would that be a more effective way to work? Just raising for conversation. I'm not saying that, I have no dogmatic opinion on this. And again, you all are lawyers and I am not.
The 91 change was the fact that we created and enacted and adopted and had approved the master harbor plan. That was a condition predicate, or like a triggering event that had to happen for the chapter 91 to be allowed. So yes, we were involved in that being allowed, but we really didn't have anything to do with any change in the overlay of 91. It was just the fact that we had, within our perusal, within our jurisdiction, we worked on and presented to the town the harbor plan. We are kind of involved in planning because we're staffed by the same people. Montana is from the planning department. But it's almost like land use versus water use. And I suppose there is some overlay, but I don't see it as cleanly.
Well, that's exactly where it would be good to have a committee. Anytime there's like land use and water use, coming up against each other, that's when you do need a committee, and that's when it makes sense to have one with some deliberation and ability to involve varying viewpoints and hammer things out together, I think.
Well, the present definition of the harbor committee is so broad, we could, decide what flowers Lisa wants to put in her yard.
Well, but there's nothing preventing harbor committee from interacting with these groups, and the groups change, and we have just, we're going to be interacting with the sewer department, with the planning department, with the Concom, with the recreation department, all those departments of town we potentially touch on. So I think the broader the definition, and actually less specific, is what gives us, as soon as you narrow it down to one committee or the other, people are going to say, well, I guess you can't talk with committees 3, 4, and 5 because you only specified you're going to talk with committees 1 and 2. And I don't think we need to narrow our scope that way.
Yeah. When you define something, you limit it, that's why I do like the present broad language, but I also do like the language from Marshfield that helps us focus. So I think that's something that the governance subcommittee is going to have to hammer out a little bit about what direction we want to go in on that.
I would like to say that I said before, I'm on the zoning bylaw committee that's looking at the zoning bylaw, for the town in different aspects. And so as that comes about from now until the next special town meeting, and then the next town meeting next year in May, that definitely, we want the input of the harbor committee, regarding the zoning in the harbor, because there are a couple of different options. There wasn't anything, I don't think, major, because most of the projects have been done. There's only a couple of spots that could be, looked at that haven't been developed or redeveloped at this point. But I think we could, definitely, and it goes out to all citizens anyway, but I think that would be something, especially when you talk about the harbor zoning and what worked, what didn't work before, because there were things that were done before with the zoning there. And then to see what, get everybody's take on it, going forward. So that's something that would be ongoing. I think would be a plug-in for the harbor committee for sure.
Sure. And it's like anything. I believe if any member of the harbor committee wants to discuss something, we can bring it up to the leadership of the committee and decide if that's going to be a focus of the time and energies of the committee, which I think will be important.
As long as deliberation is a little bit more open.
Right. Yep. True. So we're coming up to 7:06. And I think most of us have a hard stop at 7:30, and you were really great to give us this much time. So I'd like to move on to the next agenda item of David and Debbie. And do you feel like we should be reaching out to more members of the harbor committee, or do you think that you have a sense of? I mean, I do feel I wish we did have more members and more input than we presently have, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think at this point, anything that we recommend is going to the harbor committee anyway. So if they like it, don't like it, want to amend it, they'll have their chance if they already haven't piped in already. So, I mean, everyone was contacted at this point for this subcommittee meeting. So, I'd like to, move it on in some way, shape or form to the harbor committee and let everybody chew on it and see what they think. So.
Okay. Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, I do wish more people were here, but they were invited and, they didn't.
And the fact that,
So I think we probably just need to go with what information we have and the voices we've heard and make a recommendation.
okay. So what do you feel should be our next steps in the formulation of our recommendation?
Hang on once, I'm sorry.
That's her answer. She voted with her feet.
She walked on water too, so we better watch out. That's it.
It's amazing what they can do in that conservation committee.
Sorry about that.
Oh, she walked on water.
We were just saying you left and you walked on water when you did so. So we're
There is some
impressed.
sand. There is a beach there, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Water beyond it.
Well, you know what my mother used to say, you miss a meeting, they'll make you president. We miss a meeting, we'll make you write the recommendation.
Exactly.
So any thoughts about next steps?
I mean, I personally want to go back and look again at a couple of the other towns' actual bylaws. I guess it was relying on the kind of, summary thing that you gave us, but I never looked at the actual bylaws.
Okay. You have the one that is our bylaw though. I sent that out in the.
Yeah, I have I thought I did have the current bylaw. I do definitely have the kind of potential amendment.
Yeah, I can send it all out again if it's helpful.
I could probably find it. I must have it somewhere.
Sure. David, any thoughts? David, you're on mute unless you're yelling at your kids.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say the ones with the other bylaws. It had Cohasset, Manchester, Marshfield, Situate, and a waterway committee. What was the fourth one? The fifth one?
What was it? I don't know.
No, it was okay. We had Cohasset, Manchester, Marshfield, and Situate,
Okay.
and then you had the thing for discussion purposes that Tim had given us. That was the fifth thing, but it was from an email back on May the 1st. So, but if you want to resend that to look at those, look at the 4 towns, and what might look appetizing or look between the differences of them.
Right.
Because ours is certainly. It's just not, ours is certainly not as robust as the other 3. That's for sure. It's not as.
Right.
But the gain from going through the process of revising it, which sounds like a total hassle, would have to be worth doing that. I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's an argument. The process could be, you know, you never know when you propose something where it's gonna, what's the expression, you know, you never know how the sausage is made. I mean, it's, you know, as far as laws, because it could, you know, we could have a recommendation and it could be further amended in a direction that we don't want it to be amended. So we just have to take that as part of an assessment of the next steps. Can I recommend that, and Montana, I'm going to kind of depend on you a little bit. Would it make sense to just try to the governance subcommittee reconvene next week? And in the interim, you all have a chance to reread the other towns, and then in the interim, come up with beginning to craft out a recommendation to the. I know the subcommittee. Full Harbor Committee a meeting on the 7th. And there is an agenda item presently posted as an update from the governance subcommittee. It doesn't necessarily say an update on the this charge, but I think that's the expectation. But what does David and Debbie, what do you think?
Yeah, if Debbie wants to see it, could do it within that time frame. Is that a good enough time frame for you?
So to look it over again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've looked it over. I just wanted to kind of go to the actual bylaws too, and instead of just seeing the kind of summary version of it.
So I have a question. It's that we're appointed by the selectmen,
Correct.
and then we're advising the selectmen. Does that seem like a circular?
Nope, it happens all the time. and we're advisor, the actual Harbor Committee is advises not only the selectmen, but the town meeting is the actual language of the
Meeting, yeah.
So, but de facto, you go to select when the selectman proposes any change.
Right, and we don't actually have anything about who gets to be appointed the chair or elected the chair in the bylaw. Do we need that?
No, there's bylaws that govern how committees are supposed to operate, and it's not part of the Harbor Committee bylaw. It's a general bylaw.
No, it impacts all standing committees. There's
Okay.
one set of guidelines and that impacts every group.
Okay.
So I'm looking at my calendar, and next, what day is today? Today's Tuesday. I'm all messed up because of the holiday. That's the 6th. For some reason, I think that's something else in my life, but
Yeah, next Tuesday is the 6th of June.
yeah. I have to triple check, but can we tentatively say the 6th? Would that make sense?
I will say that I have a zoning board of appeals at 7 o'clock on the 6th. If we can do it before, that would be fine.
I think we probably could.
Yeah,
okay.
that'll be fine.
Like do it, but you know, my rule is 5:30 at the earliest. Maybe,
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, maybe 5:30, but I want to just check one thing in my office, if you don't mind, and I'll send an email to Montana and David and Debbie in the morning to say if the 6th is good, and if the 6th is not good, the 7th, we have the Harbor Committee on the 7th. So let's see if we can do it on the 6th.
Hey, Lisa, I might add, I mean, I think on the Harbor Committee, this will be a hot topic. And I would hope that, you rather than present, I would hope you can present what we know or what you know. Because, I think Harbor Committee, there's going to be action taken one way or another, and it'd be great for this deliberation to influence it.
Yep. Oh, definitely. I mean, I intend to do some sort of presentation. I just want to make sure that we have something that's actually in writing and adopted by Debbie and David and myself as the subcommittee. So, I mean, whatever we write up is not going to be a treatise. It's going to probably be 6 sentences.
Yeah.
Not to predetermine.
No, that's the right amount.
Yeah, but brevity sometimes gets to the point.
Yeah, I would say, brevity and unarguability. But then I don't know, be careful what you wish for. I was thinking that I wanted to ask you to make sure that one of you facilitates the presentation of the findings of this group, and that your facilitation includes the opportunity to deliberate there, and that deliberation is moderated and facilitated by one of you.
Well, the process is, I believe I'm enumerated on the agenda is presenting, and I'm the
Yep,
only,
Lisa.
yeah, and I'm the
Lisa's
only
the one. She's the chairman of it. So yeah.
yeah, and I'm the only one who's on the governance subcommittee, who's also on the harbor committee. So, where the governance subcommittee is presenting a recommendation, which will then be deliberated on by the full harbor committee. So,
But can you be the facilitator of that deliberation?
that may be determined by, of course, I can't speak to that until we have get there and just, maybe do with the election and other things. So
So you guys bring the legal skills to things, and I bring the educator skills to things. And as an educator, there's ways of getting all the voices to the table. And I would like one of you to be, you, Lisa, to be in charge of doing that, because that's going to work better. I just passed you my educator hat.
we'll see what, we haven't even come to a consensus between Debbie and David and I about what our recommendation is going to be. So when we present it, we can, the process of the harbor committee, that'll be dictated by members of the harbor committee and not just me. So
I guess what I'm hearing is, that you're going to do a presentation, but I think earlier David said, is there an opportunity to solicit additional input as part of this, rather than just be a presentation and then sit down? Is there an opportunity during your period of doing this to solicit input from other harbor committee members?
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I will do so. I'll just tell them, but part of my presentation, I will ask for input, what others think of any recommendation that we present.
Okay.
Makes sense? Okay, so any other comments? Okay, so I'm always confused if the working group has to comply with the official rules of.
Yeah, I would adjourn. Yeah, if that's.
David, are you?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved. We are now adjourning at 7:17. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Lisa.
Good to see
Thank you,
everybody.
David. Thanks,
Appreciate
Debbie.
your time.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
And
Bye-bye.
Montana, thank you very much, and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.